I'm Rob,
And I'm Nate.
and welcome back to week 4 of Billy Wilder month here on Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. This is our 4th installment in our 2020 Billy Wilder viewing, and today we watched the 1972 film Avanti.
Avanti,
Yes.
which is Italian for forward, which is used as a welcome. So when somebody says, permisso, may I come in, you say, Avanti, forward, come on in. And they, of course, explain that in the course of the film, which we will get to in due course. But prior to that, we're going to talk a little bit about Billy Wilder's career subsequent to the last film we saw, 1, 2, 3, and also subsequent to this film, since he would only make, I believe, about 3 or 4 more films after he finished this movie in the early 70s. Before we do that, though, we should establish that this is another film that Rob's going into basically blind.
Yes.
He knew that Jack Lemmon was in it, he knew when it came out, and that it was set in Italy. That's basically all, and then it was a comedy. So the last film we watched is very much the opposite of this film when it comes to tone and pacing. 1, 2, 3 is yada yada yada, da 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 da, where Avanti is as slow as an Italian bureaucracy. It is in no hurry, and it's one of the things I love about it. So after Wilder made 1, 2, 3, which you'll recall was not a financial success, $3 million budget, made $4 million. It's like, I need to have a big success now. So the obvious choice for him is, my last big success was The Apartment, and it starred Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. So let's get Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine in a romance together again. And so he made a film in 1963 called Irma la Douce, which is an adaptation of a musical play, which ironically he did not do as a musical. He took all the musical numbers out. He later said he kind of regretted it, but he didn't feel confident doing a straight musical. So this is a musical a movie that's about a romance between a police officer in Paris, played by Jack Lemmon, and a prostitute, played by Shirley MacLaine, who he sets out to reform. This is quite good. It was made for a budget of $5 million. It made $25 million at the box office, so Wilder is back on his game. Though subsequent to that, I don't think he ever had a hit of that magnitude again. The 50s were really the pinnacle of his box office prowess, and it kind of decreased from the early to mid-60s on down. So in 1964, he made a film called Kiss Me Stupid, which is a comedy with Dean Martin, who plays a Dean Martin-like singer who has car problems in a small Nevada town. And the mechanics decide they're going to try to keep him there longer because they're amateur songwriters. They want to try to sell him a song. But they're concerned, I believe Ray Wilston is the senior partner of the two songwriters. He's concerned that Dean Martin's going to sleep with his wife, played by Felisa Farr, who is the wife of Jack Lemmon.
Oh, okay.
And who also played the girl at the bar in 510 to Yuma. 310 to Yuma in the original one.
Yeah.
So they hide her away, and they hire Kim Novak, a local prostitute, to pretend to be the wife so that it's okay if Dean Martin sleeps with her. Not a great movie. Not anywhere near one of the weaker Billy Wilder movies, in my opinion. Then in 1966, he made The Fortune Cookie. 2 years before Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau starred together in The Odd Couple, they starred together in this film, which is a comedy about brothers-in-law attempting to commit insurance fraud. Quite funny. Then The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes in 1970, which we'll get to next month for our Sherlock Holmes theme, followed by our film tonight, Avanti. Then in 1974, he made a remake of The Front Page with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon and Carol Burnett. It's okay. 1978, he made his last drama, Fedora, which is a reteaming with William Holden in a plot somewhat similar to Sunset Boulevard. Holden plays a reporter attempting to land an interview with a reclusive star in, I want to say, Greece. And then his last film, which I only saw earlier this year, the only Billy Wilder directed film to come out in my lifetime, was 1981's Buddy Buddy, which has a reputation of being bad, but which I actually thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I liked it better than Kiss Me Stupid. So Wilder would continue to kind of putter around, make motions that he was going to make another film. Him and I.L. Diamond, his longtime writing partner, had an office, and they would go into the office regular, and they'd bat ideas around, including, apparently, Schindler's List. was a story Wilder was interested in making, given his family he lost a mother and sibling in the Holocaust. But that didn't work out. And then I.L. Diamond got sick, I want to say in the late 80s, and died very shortly thereafter, and Wilder went into basically retirement. He would show up. He said in later life that he went to accept a lot of those quick while they're still alive awards, Lifetime Achievement Awards and other things. He would sell a good portion of his art collection, which he had built up over the years, so that his wife, who is quite a bit younger than him, would be very comfortable when he passed on, which he eventually did in early 2002. So that takes us back to tonight's film, 1972's Avanti. This, of course, is a comedy. It is based on a play by the same name by a man named Samuel Taylor. This is Samuel A. Taylor, the same man who wrote Sabrina Fair, which was turned into the film Sabrina. This is not to be confused with Samuel W. Taylor, who wrote the short story that Flubber and then The Absent-Minded Professor was drawn from. This is a film in which Jack Lemmon plays Wendell Armbruster Jr. Armbruster Jr., who is a vice president of a large conglomerate consisting of 37 corporations and 216,000 employees. He is on the golf course when he gets the word that his father has passed away in Italy. His father would take a yearly vacation, had been doing so for many years, to this resort, for a decade at least.
Yeah.
To this island off the coast of Italy, to a resort that was famous for its mud baths and its supposed healing powers. And he'd go there for a month to unwind, and then he'd come back to his high-pressure job. But he dies while he's there. So Jack Lemmon goes from the golf course, is on the phone making arrangements for the funeral service.
He says he has half an hour to make the funeral arrangements before catching the plane.
Yeah. Catches a plane.
It's interesting
70s
kind of opening
interior
shot. He gets off the Armbruster Industries private jet to literally walk down the stairs of that and up the stairs to the Alitalia flight.
Which I love the interior. I love looking at the 70s.
Yeah.
A 1970s jet is very 1970s. And there's a funny early gag where he switches clothes with a doctor. Because it's like, I can't show up at the airport in my golf clothes. This guy's got a suit.
To reclaim my father's
body. So they go into the
lavatory
together. Everybody on the plane is like, what the crap is going on there?
You know, I think this might be kind of a Billy Wilder tribute to one of his original ideas for this movie, in which Mr. Armbruster Sr. was going to be having his affair at the hotel with a bellhop.
Really?
Yeah. He had to be dissuaded from that idea by the studio.
Oh, bet. Yeah.
So I wonder if that wasn't kind of an homage to that.
Kind of the gay joke there, yeah. So they get to Italy, and then he has to take a train and then a boat to get to this little island. In the process of doing that, he keeps running into this woman, and we're going to spoil... It's not really a surprise. This woman, played by Juliette Mills, Miss Pamela Piggott, is the daughter of a woman whom Wendell Armbruster Sr. has been having a decade-long yearly affair with at this resort.
Yes.
And, of course, this film, they don't like each other at first. They get on each other's nerves, but they're going to be repeating their parents by the end of the picture. And, that's not the point of the film. The point of the film is not what happens, not the plot, not where you end up. It's the journey there.
Yes.
As I said before, this film is in no hurry to get where it's going. It is the exact opposite of 1, 2, 3. It's a very comfortable film. Jack Lemmon, one of the thoughts I had is Jack Lemmon just seems so much more comfortable here and in this part than James Cagney did in 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Just much more natural here. Cagney was good, but this film just feels so much more relaxed and intentionally.
Well, and it was right up Jack Lemmon's aisle.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of pacing and the way that some of these jokes were written, that was... I mean, that Jack Lemmon did that type of stuff many a time. Most of the Jack Lemmon films I've seen, you could say he was playing a somewhat similar character to what he's playing in this film.
Plays a slightly uptight gentleman
who unwinds progressively as the movie progresses. So yeah.
So yeah, it's a charming film. This was one of 7 movies that Billy Wilder made with Jack Lemmon, who was his by far his most common leading man. His closest competitor was William Holden, who starred in 4 films for Billy Wilder. The supporting cast is largely Italian actors. The two other real standouts is Edward Andrews as J.J. Blodgett, an entertaining State Department official. He's able to bring about a lot of these very contemporary 1972 jokes. This film is just loaded with them. It's really a time capsule. But I think the guy who steals the movie for me has got to be Clive Revel as Carlo Carlucci.
Yep.
What would you say his job title?
The hotel manager.
Who is just great.
Yeah.
And who's just there to help get through all the bureaucracy. I mean, this film is about just trying to accomplish the seemingly simple task of getting Jack Lemmon's father's body back to the United States in time for the funeral that Tuesday. The film starts on a Saturday.
Or they arrive in
Friday.
Italy. They board the plane on Friday. They
yeah.
arrive in Italy on Saturday. Yeah.
So he doesn't have very much time to do this. It seems like it should be pretty straightforward, but it's not.
But it's Italy, and they don't work on the weekend.
Yeah, they don't work on the weekend. They take 3-hour lunches. There's all this bureaucracy. There's blackmail schemes, at least 2, that pop up during the course of the film. And everything that can go wrong will go wrong kind of scenario. But I just found it utterly charming.
Yeah.
It
is a very charming film.
It's really, it's not. It's hard to say like what's the standout aspect of this film. It's like what is the great? It just everything works for me.
I honestly think the standout moment of this film is the ending.
Yeah.
Where they come to the agreement.
The joke ending.
No, when they come to the agreement to basically do what their parents have been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with a play and a film called Same Time Next Year.
No.
Which is a Neil Simon play, which was made into a movie in the late 70s with Alan Alda and Ellen Burstyn. And it is another film about monogamous adultery.
Yeah.
It's about these two people that meet together at the same weekend every year and have this affair. And they're the only people they cheat on their spouses with. They do it once a year, and it goes on in the play for something like 15 years. It's weird because it's like this film... It's romanticizing it. It's romanticizing infidelity.
Yeah.
So on a certain level, obviously, it's not comfortable, but it's also so charming that you're almost like, these two get an exception.
Yeah.
It's like most people can't, but it's okay if these two do.
Well, it's kind of like the little bit of gratuitous nudity that's in this movie.
Yeah.
It's put into a format that's so charming you almost don't object to it.
Yeah. So this film, the first time I saw it, I think I've probably seen it 4 or 5 times. I think I first saw it in like 2003, 2004. I should watch this more often. It's just the mood of the piece. You don't necessarily have to pay full attention to it, but just the mood that the movie brings. But the first time I liked it, I didn't care for it because I didn't think anything happened, and I didn't care for the nudity.
I'm surprised you didn't like it.
But it grew on me. I watched it again a few years later, and it just clicked for me that second time because I knew what it was. And I guess I was less prudish the second time I saw it than I was the first time. One of my big criticisms early on would have been that Billy Wilder started his film writing largely during the period of the height of enforcement of the production code. And so you had to be more clever to communicate certain things, like adultery, in a code film than you could just go all out and do it. And it felt like he was too free. Just like, I'm going to throw in nudity in it just because I can throw in nudity in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I kind of wish he had done it smarter, but actually that gag is actually pretty funny.
Well, that gag is funny, and then the way they work it back in later in the film.
Yeah.
Like when she's going through the town and she goes by the boat.
Yeah.
And waves to him, and they start chasing her, and she has to make an escape. They make a pretty good joke out of it, but the few moments of nudity in this film are purely gratuitous. Mm. Yeah.
And the nude woman, of course, is Pamela Piggott.
Well, there's actually 2.
I'm blanking on the other one.
The mustachioed maid.
Oh, the mustachioed maid, yes.
Yeah.
That one doesn't count. But Juliette Mills, who plays Pamela Piggott, is the older sister of the actress Haley Mills, known for The Parent Trap and a lot of the Disney stuff she did in the 60s. When this film was made, Juliette Mills was coming off of a television show called The Nanny and the Professor, which is basically Mary Poppins, the TV show. Only there's not really magic in it. She's just like super intuitive.
Yeah.
And that's really probably what she's largely known for, even today, is that series. And she was on a soap opera that ran from 1999 to 2008 called Passions.
Yeah.
Do you remember Passions?
No.
This was a soap opera that was kind of doing a campy variation on the Dark Shadows thing. And Juliette Mills played a witch. And she always had this little person actor as like her assistant. And I just remember flipping through the channels, and whenever she was on with the midget, I would stop and watch it. And then when it got to the regular soap opera stuff, it wasn't so interesting. But it was just so bizarre to have this witch that was manipulating people in a daytime soap. But I really like her in this.
Yeah.
She's very charming. They have a good chemistry. Yeah. She is what I would call comforting pretty.
Yes.
I've made that intimidating pretty versus comforting pretty. She's comforting pretty. She gained 25 pounds for this role in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, I have not seen any of the, what's that Renee Zellweger series of films?
Like Bridget Jones?
Bridget Jones.
Yeah.
I've not seen any of those, but I imagine this is a Bridget Jones type character. The Bridget Jones is similar. This slightly neurotic, slightly overweight.
I mean, I've only seen the first one and like a few minutes of the second one, and I really wasn't paying attention the first time I saw the first one, but more neurotic and things like that.
Much more neurotic.
Yeah. You know what movie parts of this reminded me of another movie, and I'm not even sure if you've seen this other movie or if you got the connections, but have you seen the second Mamma Mia?
I've not even seen the first Mamma Mia.
You should actually watch those at some point. They are surprisingly entertaining. I'm not saying they're going to be your favorite movies or anything like that.
Well, I can see that off the top of my head in terms of similarities, because Hotel on an Island.
Well, not just that, but in particular the second Mamma Mia, which as entertaining as it is, I don't think it's as good as the first one. The second Mamma Mia, the mom has died. The daughter's trying to kind of validate the mom's memory, things like that. But
so is Meryl Streep not in the sequel?
Not really, no.
Like maybe very briefly?
Like kind of flashback type things,
really?
but she's really not. I don't even think that she performed any acting for the second one.
I didn't know that.
But the second one does have Cher. It has, anyways. I think you will dislike the ending of the second one, but I think you'd enjoy the rest of the second one. I think you would enjoy the first one. But there are parts of this film that really remind me of the Mamma Mia, in particularly Mamma Mia 2. That was the only one that really came to mind to me in terms of what this, might have been inspired by this film. But that one also is set in Greece, which, as we hear from Mr. Peugeot, is to the left of Italy.
Yeah. Yes, not as long as I'm in the State Department. That is a great performance. So J.J. Blodgett, Edward Andrews, he was a working character actor.
Yeah.
It's really not a standout performance in his career, but if you see him, you're like, I've seen that guy somewhere before. And he plays this friend of the armbursters, who's a longtime State Department official, who, because they're encountering all this bureaucracy getting the body out, he decides to come down from his station in Paris.
Well, he's been contacted by the family in Baltimore, not by Mr.
Yeah, by his
Armbruster.
Wife, by Armbruster's wife.
And so he comes from Paris over to Italy to come expedite the process.
And he has some great name-dropping gags, and he's funny.
Yeah.
And he's also helps facilitate the way they get around all this bureaucracy at the end, which is to swear in the corpse as a member of the diplomatic service, so that they can treat him as a diplomatic pouch and get him out of Italy without all the bureaucracy that they keep running into.
Red tape and paperwork, yep.
That's always the gag that I remember about this film. Like, if I'm telling somebody about this film...
That's such a small portion of the film.
It is such a small portion of the film, but it's just very memorable.
Yeah. Well, you know who they wanted to cast instead of Edward Andrews for that role?
Indeed.
They wanted to cast, or there was talk of casting Walter Matthau for that role.
Which would have been great.
I think it would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
I think
this guy did a good job, but Matthau would have done just as good of or a better of a job.
I expect better, but yeah. It would have been pretty entertaining, but it's good either way. And probably helped keep the budget down.
And I was going to mention something about the actor Clive Revell, who played Carlo Carlucci.
Yep.
He's just so great in this.
Yeah.
He is still with us. He is 90 years old. And where would you guess he was born?
I don't know.
He was born in New Zealand.
Really?
But he's a perfect Italian here.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of funny Italian jokes and supporting characters, the Trotta brothers.
Yep.
Who are introduced.
Which, in hindsight, that's actually one of the weakest scenes of the film. because it ends up like the payoff, like they go through all this effort, to make this agreement, and the payoff is Mr. Carlucci goes and makes the the payoff. And so they don't pay off that scene, and so I was kind of like, well, wouldn't
Well, Carlucci, in addition to providing comic relief, is a little bit of the deus ex machina of the film. Like, if they don't want to deal with some, we want to go off and have funny adventures.
Well,
with
but then
Jack
why did
Lemmon.
they even make that scene?
I don't know. It was funny itself. This is adapted from a play.
Well, it
so
was
maybe...
funny, but I expected that at some point there would be some payoff that they go
well,
back to
the
that.
Trotters do come back at the end.
Yeah.
For the burial. Again, spoiler. So there's this idea that Pamela Pigott introduces that they loved each other, we should bury them here in Italy. And Jack Lemmon's like, we can't because we're going to have the big funeral and Billy Graham's going to be there and Henry Kissinger. And eventually, as the two fall for each other, they're like, you know what, we're going to do that. And we're going to take this other minor character who got murdered by the mustachioed maid. Bruno. We're going to put him in the casket and send him back and have the funeral for him. Which he'd like because he was trying to blackmail Jack Lemmon into getting him a passport to go back to the United States. Where
because he'd been deported.
He'd immigrated there, but he'd been deported,
yeah.
And he always wanted to get back.
Well, and he wanted to escape the maid who apparently was pregnant.
Yes, the mustachioed maid.
Yeah.
And so they bury them there without last names in the Carlucci family.
No, they gave him a last name.
Oh, yeah, they did. They made him Carlucci.
They buried them as, not Wendell, what did they call him?
I forget.
Anyways, but they called them just by their first names and then gave them the last name of Carlucci.
This film makes me want to go to Italy specifically in 1972.
Yeah.
It's like when I saw Diamonds Are Forever, and I'm like, I want to go to 1971 Las Vegas.
Yeah.
That's the Las Vegas I want to see.
Yeah.
I want to go to the islands of Italy in 1972.
Yeah, you want to take that plane flight when you can smoke on the plane. Not that you would be smoking on the plane, but you want to.
I just want to
that orange interior.
Admire the orange interior the entire way.
Yeah. Yep.
And read a nice thick newspaper.
Yes. I thought he wanted the newspaper when they first started doing that.
Me too. Yeah.
Do we want to reference any of the good lines on this?
Sure. There's many of them, as one expects in a Diamond Wilder script.
Oh, there's I guess not just lines, but some of the funny scenes. Like there's the scene where they discover the nightie in the slippers underneath his father's bed. Oh, the coroner eats well. He knows all the widows.
Mm.
Oh, and we also forgot to talk about the morgue. That is a gorgeous morgue.
That is.
And with that beautiful painting on the wall behind it.
The morgue is in a building that obviously was not always a morgue. It was probably a church at one point, or a monastery or something. It's up on a mountain. It has very limited hours. And it is a freaking painting, like a Renaissance painting inside. It's so beautiful. And it's... Wilder's not particularly remembered for his cinematography. I mean, there are some great shots in Sunset Boulevard and the shots of the office in the apartment, the way it's all symmetrical. But I don't think he's ever been more painterly, except for maybe in The Emperor Waltz with the composition of some of his shots. But it's Italy, which, lends itself to that.
Oh, and they make a reference to Dr. Christian Bernard, which you were telling me he was the first person to perform a heart transplant.
Yeah. And I was looking up Dr. Christian Bernard. He died of a heart attack.
Did he really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's kind of destined,
Yeah.
Blodgett's just got most of the funny lines that come to mind. Maybe it's one of those Greek islands. No, sir. Greece is way to the left. Not as long as I'm with the State Department. Are you guys sure this is Ischia? Reasonably sure, sir. Because I don't want to land in Africa. That would be bigger, sir. I don't object to foreigners speaking a foreign language. I just wish they'd all speak the same foreign language. What the hell is going on in this country? This wouldn't have happened in the old days. You remember Mussolini? How Blodgett is able to expedite his needs because he finds out that the person at the helicopter pad is an unreconstructed Mussolini guy. And then there's that whole sequence where Carlo is trying to slow down Blodgett because Jack Lemmon and Juliette Mills are in bed together, and he doesn't want to get that spoiled. So he's like, Mr. Blodgett, I am Carlo Carlucci, director of this hotel. Such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. It may interest you to know that we had another famous American diplomat staying here once, Mr. Benjamin Franklin. Franklin? Oh, yes, Ben Franklin. Well, a good man for his time. Of course, today I'm not sure he could pass the security check. Would you like to see his room? It is in the old part of the building. Not now. Excuse me, I would like your advice about something, straight from the horse's mouth. Do you think there will be a war in the Middle East? Oh, we don't give out that kind of information. You see, I have been offered a job with an American chain of hotels, the Sheraton. And there are a couple of openings, and one of them is in Damascus. Damascus. Now, don't quote me on this, but with the Russian presence escalating in the Mediterranean and the military posture of the Arabs stiffening and the first strike capabilities of the Israelis at its peak, the whole place is a powder keg that could blow up in your face any second. My advice, forget Damascus. Thank you. In that case, I better take the other job. What's that? The Sheraton in New York. Take the one in Damascus. He's great. He's not in a lot of the movie, but he's great. Carlucci's great.
This is another great Blodgett one. This is between him and Armbruster. We don't need to export an export license. We're going to bypass all that bull. Bypass? How can you do that? No sweat. We're appointing your father commercial attaché to the embassy in Rome, and that entitles him to all the rights and immunities of a diplomat. But wait a minute. We're going to appoint him. Why not? A dead man? That just proves we don't discriminate against anybody for reasons of race, creed, color, or state of health.
It's a witty script. I'd be kind of curious to see a production of the play, to see how it differs. One thing I liked about this film is if you hadn't told me ahead of time that this was adapted from a play, I wouldn't have guessed it. Because it's so open. It's like so many plays stay very stage-bound, and this film has a really strong sense of local color to it. Which I'm sure you couldn't have possibly gotten in the stage play.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Did you get the lead paint Ralph Nader joke?
Yes. Goddamn Ralph Nader.
Yeah. What was the relation to the lead paint, though?
I'm trying to remember. Armbruster
well, he's talking about lead paint on the turf, that they're going to have to recall the turf because it's got too much lead in the green paint.
Yeah.
And then he curses
Ralph Nader, yeah.
I didn't get that connection to Ralph Nader and the lead paint.
Well, Ralph Nader, of course, being a consumer advocate.
Okay.
That seems like the kind of... I don't know if he was involved in the lead paint issues that were happening probably shortly before the time of this movie, but it seems like something he'd been involved in.
Yeah. Now, one other thing I wanted to bring up about this, and this has become a theme for me through this month of Billy Wilder films, small sets again. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of set pieces to this. There's the opening airport scene, the airplane, the train, the boat, the hotel. There's one or two other little, like the scene with the Trottas, and then basically the airport, the other airport when they get.
There's not. I mean, when Miss Pigot's going through town on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
You get, but that's all location shooting. They don't have to build those sets.
Yeah.
What would you guess that this film cost to make?
I don't remember.
$2.75 million. Less than a lot of the early 60s films that he made, and it's probably because it was filmed largely overseas. And
you would think they would have ended up paying Jack Lemmon that much.
Yeah. Yeah, Jack Lemmon being a pretty big star, but very loyal to Billy Wilder. It was a box office failure, though. It made $1.5 million.
Wow.
So that's a pretty sizable loss. Though Jack Lemmon did win a Golden Globe for Best Actor, Musical, or Comedy.
Yeah, this is a pleasant film. It's really fun, and actually, I'm kind of surprised it ranks pretty high in the order of how I would rank these 4 films for this month.
Yeah,
but I guess before we get to that, we should rank this movie.
Yeah,
rate the movie. How would you rate the movie?
You know what? Part of me says this is a 3-star film, but I just like it so much. Like, it's just so charming that I pop it up half a star. I give it 3.5 stars. I would give it probably 7 or 8 on the 10-star scale.
I was pretty similar range. For me, right out of the gate, I was going to say this is a 3-star movie, but I would probably give this an 8 on the 10-star scale. Yeah, this movie, it won me over pretty easily. I really enjoyed this film. It's
a film that's very rewatchable. Yeah. And watching it again, and it's been years since I've seen it, this should be part of my regular rotation. I know we've discussed you like to kind of watch things a lot.
Well, there are movies that if they're good, I like to revisit them. Whether it's once a year, once every couple of years, something of that nature.
And I don't have a ton of those, and the ones that I have are usually the ones that are you have to commune with the movie. Whereas this has a certain video wallpaper quality, that's putting it down too much, but it's something that I just like the idea of having it on.
Yeah.
And then you stop occasionally. The way you watch movies when you're a little kid. I'm doing something. Oh, this scene. Okay, I'll go back to doing the other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm thoroughly charmed by this movie. It was I'd forgotten how much I liked it.
So you presented these 4 films to me in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
How would you actually rate these films in terms of which ones are your favorites?
Well, number 1 is quite clearly Sunset Boulevard. It's just an amazing, iconic film. It gets a little bit more complicated after that, because if you were to have asked me right on, I'd say, well, of course, Witness for the Prosecution. And you know what? I think I would stay with it. But I would put this number 3, and I put 1, 2, 3 number 4.
I think you're going to be surprised by my ranking of
Is
these
it the
films.
same?
No.
No. Okay.
No. I really enjoyed Sunset Boulevard. It is iconic. It is film literacy. It's all of the monikers you want to apply to a film of that nature. For me, it was not the favorite of this month.
Oh, I'm curious.
Witness for the Prosecution, I think I would probably put number 1. I actually might put Avanti ahead of Sunset Boulevard.
Really?
But it's Sunset Boulevard and Avanti.
They're very different beasts.
They're different beasts, but they're also right there together. So it's really kind of flip a coin whether you want to put Sunset Boulevard second or Avanti second, but whichever one isn't there is third, and fourth is 1, 2, 3.
Which we both liked.
Yes.
But that was, seeing this one again, I'm like, oh, it's so good. I forgot how good it was, and maybe it's better than I remembered. Whereas when I was watching 1, 2, 3, which again had been many years since I'd seen it, it's like, you know what? I'm not liking it as much as I remember liking it. I still liked it.
Yeah.
And I still think that, for me, the pacing makes the movie. But that's just as true of Avanti. The pacing makes the movie.
Yeah. Well, and it's less reliant on like gags and bits, whereas 1, 2, 3 is entirely...
It's a mood piece.
Yeah.
It's there's not really that many laugh out loud jokes here. It's just kind of amusing situation and amusing characters.
And it has a great score too.
Yeah, I wish we had a little audio of it, but it's just a beautiful little score. Wilder's films often have nice scores. Like The Apartment has a wonderful little love theme to it.
Yeah.
And this has a nice love theme to it. And of course, 1, 2, 3 has a very memorable score. Of course, it's borrowed from another source. And Sunset Boulevard, and a lot of his earlier films, had scores by the great Franz Waxman that are very much orchestral of the period. So, Billy Wilder Month, you came in knowing that this is a name Nate refers to fairly regularly, but you didn't really have much
I
that
thoroughly
you'd
enjoyed
associate
it, and
with
I'm now going to be seeking out some Billy Wilders.
Yeah, I think next year, the plan is to do it again. I think we're going to probably see Irma La Douce, see the reteaming of Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. I think we'll probably see Ace in the Hole, and we'll probably see one of his screwballs from the 40s, not necessarily one he directed. We might do an Ernest Lubitsch one that he wrote.
Okay.
But, I'll ruminate on that for the next 12 or so months.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It's always fun to revisit these films and to introduce new people to them.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I mean, again, as I joked in one of our other episodes, this is, to some extent, this month has been Nate helps Rob fulfill his movie goals, because I think almost any Billy Wilder film you watch, you could almost consider film literacy, and this was great. I would consider this a classic film.
Yeah.
So maybe not film literacy, but it was a classic film. Anything else to add on this one?
No.
Well, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this has been Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
We're going to do our drawing
Ah.
for next month. This may take me a moment to write up. So this coming month, we will be doing Sherlock Holmes month, where we'll watch various films starring the Arthur Conan Doyle detective character. I have selected 4. Now, the way I tend to want to present things is chronologically, but we decided we were going to mix it up a little bit. So I have written the titles or something descriptive of the movies, and I'm going to put them in my Scotland hat, and Rob is going to draw one, which will determine what we watch for the first week, and then after each episode, until we get down to the end, we'll draw one for the next week. So the films that we're going to be visiting is the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes from the early 20-teens.
Yeah.
A movie I quite like called The 7% Solution from the 1970s. Billy Wilder's The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes from the early 70s. And one, possibly 2, of the Basil Rathbone series of Sherlock Holmes films from the 1940s, which is actually updated to the 1940s as opposed to the Victorian era. Those films tend to be around an hour, so I think it's very likely that we'll watch more than one.
Yeah.
So I've got them all on these pieces of paper. I'm putting them in the Scotland hat. I am putting said hat in the proximity of Rob.
Nate, why did you just shuffle the same piece of paper around? I'm kidding.
What are we watching?
Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. from the get-go,
Get that
the
out of the
newest
way.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Rob will be more or less curating that one.
Yep.
Because I have not seen it, and I am frankly coming in a little suspicious of it.
I'm not sure how much to say ahead of time. Yeah, I'm
Well,
not sure how much I want to say ahead of time.
We'll get into it.
Yep. All right. Well, we will see you guys next week for the start of Sherlock Holmes.